behalf of the Fellowship Beyond Numbers and Study Bible Forum, everyone, welcome to our first event of the year. My name is Charlie, and I'm an actuary at Allianz. Today, I'll be your MC and your host. Over the next 45 minutes, sit back, relax. It's a virtual event, so be as comfortable as you want to be. But do listen in, because we'll be hearing about an important and timely topic on finding security that lasts. If you've been invited by someone and don't know who we are, Fellowship Beyond Numbers is the organizer, and we're a network of people who work in the numbers industry, like actuaries, accountants, and superannuation professionals. We're an open network, and we welcome people with all faiths and backgrounds, anyone who's curious and wants to engage with asking the bigger questions on life beyond numbers. Apart from quarterly events, we have weekly and fortnightly virtual catch-ups, and we'll be hearing about them a bit later on. But first, let's meet our speaker, Tony Kong. Tony, hello. You're going to be telling us about finding security today. So let's give you a little interview first to get to know you a bit better.
Sure.
If there's one thing that makes you feel insecure right now, what would it be?
Well, firstly, it's really great to be here. I'm excited to be able to share. So thanks for having me. And insecurity right now, I'm feeling a little bit sheepish right now, not going to lie. And it's not because I'm not confident in what I'm about to share or say, but I think, just feel privileged to be able to share today. And this is an event that I went to a lot while I was working in the city as an actuary, and being able to come back and share is it's fun.
And as you mentioned, you did previously work as an actuary for one of the big four. Can you tell us about some of the joys and challenges from back in those days?
Yeah, so that was 3 or 4 years ago. When I was working as a life and ERM actuary. Joys and challenges. I might start with a challenge. I think, like a lot of people, just finding the balance between work and other commitments. I think I really enjoyed the sort of work I was doing. I found it really rewarding, really stimulating, and at times maybe a bit too rewarding, a bit too stimulating. And so I think I would be happy to overwork, I think, at times, which made it challenging for some of my friends and family who wanted to spend more time with me. In terms of joys, I would say my team and being able to work with some really brilliant people, people who are really passionate about what they were doing, and it really actually kind of boggles my mind in terms of this new environment that we're all in because of the pandemic, and not being able to be together as much and working remotely. I remember probably my highlights was smashing our work in rooms where we just spent hours and skip lunch, and I found that really exciting and actually enjoyed that. So
cool. And now you're studying at Bible College. Can you tell us what that's like and what's different?
Yeah, so I mean, this, you can see I'm actually in my dorm room at college, and what's different? What's the same? So it's a really different space that I'm in. I think one thing that actually maybe similar, I think, would be the intensity. I found my role in consulting quite intense, quite demanding. But at Bible College, my brain is operating at an intense level as well, but in a different way. I feel like a different part of my brain is activated. A lot less numbers and spreadsheets, but a lot more kind of pondering the big questions about life, thinking about God, faith, some of those kind of significant questions. So really, really enjoying that at the moment.
Okay, so thank you for coming and giving us a little talk today. Just to the audience, letting you know that there will be some time for Q&A after Tony's presentation. If you have any questions that pop up as he's talking, please message them to the number that Martin will type in the chat room right now. But yes, apart from that, take it away, Tony. Thank you for giving us your time.
Okay, pleasure. I want to reiterate again, it's a great joy and privilege to be able to share and speak today. Thanks for inviting me back. I was on the steering committee a number of years ago, and yeah, really found it a rewarding experience holding these events and talking about some of the bigger questions in life. And yeah, I want to thank you for being here and choosing to spend your lunch this way. Today's topic is finding security. What I aim to do in the next 15 minutes or so is pretty simple. I want to present the Christian answer, the Christian response to how can we find true security? What kind of security really matters? Finding security, it's something that we all want. It's something that we all work towards. How do we find security? Well, if you're someone who's working in super, you might say superannuation. You might say you need to save and invest well so that you can set yourself up for the future. If you're an actuary, you might say insurance. Make sure you have the appropriate level of wealth protection for your needs and your risks. How do we find security and what does that look like? Bill Perkins, in his recent book, Die with Zero, I think captures quite well how most people think about security. His whole idea is you actually want to die with zero wealth because life is all about experiences. He has this simple model there. You have your life energy, you pour that into your work, you accumulate money and wealth, and in turn, you get to have rewarding experiences. Makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? You obviously work for wealth and you need to build financial security, but no one wants to die with more money in their bank, right? People want experiences. But is there more to it than just that? As we shall see, Jesus offers a challenge to this approach to finding security. Jesus, in one of his biographies, tells a story about a rich fool who seems to have done everything right in building security, but ends up being called a fool. Perhaps today you'll be challenged by what Jesus has to say about finding security as well. I'll read out the story. It's only 8 lines long, and then I'll work through the story and see what it might mean for us. It goes like this. Someone in the crowd said to Jesus, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." But he said to him, "Man, who made me a judge or arbitrator over you?" And he said to them, "Take care and be on your guard against all covetousness, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions." And he told them a parable, saying, "The land of a rich man produced plentifully. And he thought to himself, 'What shall I do? For I have nowhere to store my crops.' And he said, 'I will do this. I will tear down my barns and build bigger ones, larger ones, and there I will store all my grain and my goods. And I will say to my soul, Soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, be merry.' But God said to him, 'Fool, this night your soul is required of you. And the things you have prepared, whose will they be? So is the one who lays up treasure for himself and is not rich toward God.'" When the story, Jesus, as he often does, has drawn a crowd around him. And someone in the crowd comes up to Jesus to ask him to sort out an inheritance issue. We don't really need to worry about that too much because Jesus basically dismisses it, but instead uses it as an opportunity to give the crowd a warning. He says, "Take care and be on your guard against all covetousness, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions." Jesus warns his hearers of the danger of covetousness or greed. Why? Well, according to Jesus, life does not consist of an abundance of possessions. In other words, life is not about storing away and having more things. Why is that a problem, though? What is wrong with storing up riches for ourselves? Jesus goes on to answer the question with a parable or a story. He says, "The land of a rich man produced plentifully, and he thought to himself, 'What shall I do? For I have nowhere to store my crops.' Here is a rich man that becomes even richer. He managed to strike success. His land produced a big harvest, and now he has a problem on his hands. He has nowhere to store his harvest." This makes me think of someone like a Bill Gates or Mark Zuckerberg. perhaps in Australia, a Melanie Perkins kind of person, incredibly successful, incredibly wealthy, in a position of security and power. For us, reaping an abundant harvest might mean getting that lucrative promotion. It might mean having the foresight to invest in Bitcoin before it shot through the roof. It might mean finally getting through your Part 3 actuarial exams. What does the rich man do with his surplus wealth? Well, he says, I will do this. I will tear down my barns and build larger ones. And there I will store all my grain and my goods. And I will say to my soul, soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, be merry. The man stores and protects his wealth. He saves it and he invests it. I have a friend who I know is aiming for something called FIRE. FIRE, so not FIAA, he's not trying to become an actuary, but FIRE. It stands for Financial Independence, Retire Early. His goal is to be financially independent and basically not have to work by the age of 35. And I actually found out about this because I saw him on YouTube. He has a YouTube channel trying to document this journey. He has about 60,000 subscribers. According to Vanguard Investments, a survey done last year, almost 1 in 4 millennials aim to retire before the age of 60. Basically, there's a whole movement of people that are trying to save and invest in a way such that they can accelerate their ability to take life easy, eat, drink, and be merry. Now, I don't know if there are some of you here who have this aspiration as well, but it's a pretty appealing idea, isn't it? Imagine if you're able to retire right now. Imagine if you didn't need to go back to work. Wouldn't that be true security? The rich man in the story played his cards right. He got rich, and he did what any wise person would. He saved it, he invested it, so that he can enjoy a good life. But in this story, Jesus actually calls this man a fool. This man, rich, successful, financially independent, set himself up for a good future. This man gets called a fool. Well, what's the problem here? The problem wasn't that he wanted to have the good life, I think. The problem wasn't that he was rich. The problem wasn't necessarily that he saved and invested his wealth. Jesus highlights the problem in the final part of the story. But God said to him, fool, this night your soul is required of you, and the things you have prepared, whose will they be? So is the one who lays up treasure for himself and is not rich toward God. I wonder if you see the problem here. 2 things. First, the man is called a fool because he stored up things that don't last. When I was a kid, I loved playing a game called Magic the Gathering. Right, that was the kind of nerd I was. It involved buying and collecting cards, pieces of paper that had pictures on them. You would buy packs to try to get rare cards that were valuable. And I remember trying to convince my parents that this was actually a wise investment decision to give me money for them. I would say, look, these are worth hundreds and thousands of dollars. I would say, look, these cards actually appreciate. As it turned out, they don't end up appreciating, particularly the way that I treated them. We also, I think, like the man in the story, have a tendency to store up things that don't last. Might not be cards or games, but we like to collect things as well. It might be cars. It might be cars. It might be properties. We like to collect experiences that we can look back on. We also store up things like qualifications, our projects, our achievements. But can these things give us true security? You may have seen this story on the news this week, but Wayne Harrison is one of those poor people who have been devastated by the terrible floods in New South Wales. In the picture, you can see the mansion that he had just finished and was about to move in 2 weeks from now. But then the floods came and it wiped away his dream home. It's really terrible to see. He's actually in really good spirits. I watched the interview of him talking about it. But it's a reminder, I think, that ultimately these things that we collect, these things that we store away, don't last. They can all be gone in a flash, whether in a flood or in a market crash, whether ultimately all of us eventually will come a time when we don't last. The sobering reality is that death takes away all of our things. We can't take it with us to the grave. God said to him, "Fool, this night your soul is required of you, and the things you have prepared, whose will they be?" The man is called a fool because he stored up things that don't last. Well, secondly, the man is called a fool because he had neglected God. And this really is the punchline of the story, isn't it? The man stored up things for himself, but was not rich toward God. During my stint in consulting, one of the things that I very quickly realized was that success was not simply about doing a good job. Doing a good job is crucial, but if I was a jerk to my clients, if I had a bad relationship with my boss, it doesn't matter how good the model that I built was, doesn't matter if I was the hardest worker, doesn't matter if I met every single deadline, all of that would have been for nothing, because relationships matter. Jesus' warning earlier was that life is more than just an abundance of possessions. According to Jesus, life is all about right relationship with God. So is the one who lays up treasure for himself and is not rich toward God. The problem with Bill Perkins' model for finding security is that God is entirely missing from it. The model is flawed because it's missing the key variable. The model is flawed because it assumes that we can work our way to security when in fact we can't. According to Jesus, the problem is that we have all in some way, like the fool, tried to find security in the things that God has given us and not in God himself. And Jesus' warning is that we are all accountable for it. Tonight, your soul is demanded of you. The man has neglected God, and in doing so, put his soul at risk. You see, we spend all our time and our lives storing away things that ultimately don't last, but God can at any time demand our lives and hold us accountable for our neglect of him. Jesus speaks just in the section prior to this story about coming judgment, a day when God will hold everyone accountable. It's not something we want to hear, but it is Jesus' loving warning. There can be no security for us on that day. It doesn't matter how much you have. It doesn't matter how much you've done. It doesn't matter how much you've experienced. There can be no security when we come face to face with God. We buy all sorts of insurance to manage and mitigate our risks. We know to buy life insurance, but there isn't insurance for our souls, is there? Like the rich fool, we have neglected God and so have put our souls at risk. So the question is, how can we find true security? The Bible's answer to that question involves acknowledging that we can't have true security by our own means. Death is the issue that we all face, and being accountable before God for not being rich towards him is the issue we can't deal with ourselves. But the good news is that Jesus not only warns us of the folly and danger, but actually provides the solution. The Apostle Paul says these words about finding true security. For you know the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, that though he was rich, yet for your sake he became poor, so that you through his poverty might become rich. Now, you may be someone who's familiar with this message. You may not be. But here it is. Jesus, being God, is the one who was rich, but made himself poor by dying on the cross so that we can be rich if we put our trust in him and live for him. The good news is that security can be found. And Jesus doesn't just tell us how to find it. He actually becomes our security. through Jesus' poverty, his death on the cross, we can actually become rich. Why listen to Jesus about this kind of security? Because he died and rose again for us. That is the center of the Christian message. Jesus warns us that we can't find it by storing up riches for ourselves and neglecting God. But Jesus offers true and lasting security, a security that can't be taken away if we will trust and live for him. So where does that leave us? We all want security and we all want the good life. Well, I wonder what you make of Jesus' offer of true security here. One of my favorite projects that I got the privilege of working on was in the ERM space, in the enterprise risk management space. We got to develop new technologies and tools to improve how we identify and measure enterprise risks. And one of the really significant findings that was important for the process is to provide agitation. It's to have external input that challenges our results. That was actually crucial to improving how we identify and measure risks. Well, I wonder if Jesus is that important external challenge that you need to see what your greatest risk is. I wonder if Jesus is that agitation that you need to consider whether you do have true security. I wonder if what Jesus is offering here is so significant and so consequential that it warrants at least a closer look. I wonder if it's just too risky to not at least investigate and explore Jesus and his claims, if not to actually put your trust and live for him. So would you consider Jesus and his challenge of finding security in him?
Thank you, Tony, for the talk. That's given everyone something to think about. Please, if you have questions, the number that just got messaged around, that's where you want to send those to. In the meantime, while you think about questions that you want to ask, can I invite Isaac Kuruvilla to share a little bit about your story and any reflections about this topic of finding security? Thank you, Isaac.
Thanks, Charlie, and thanks, Tony, for that very thought-provoking talk. Hopefully it'll stimulate a lot of questions. I'm just going to spend 3 to 4 minutes talking about a time where I faced a lot of insecurity in my professional career. So quick thing about me, my name's Isaac, I'm married with 3 kids. I've been working at the Sydney Anglican Diocese for about 20 years. So that's me. Feel free to say hi to me later on. So, the theology. When people come to know Christ as their Saviour, they are brought into a relationship with God that guarantees their eternal security. Jude 24 declares, "To him who is able to keep you from falling and to present you before his glorious presence without fault and with great joy." So God's power is able to keep the believer from falling. It's all up to him. We know this is true, don't we? But sometimes life throws us curveballs. What do I do when I go through periods of insecurity? Especially when I experience questions such as, does God love me? Is there an end to his forgiveness? Is there something better that I should be doing with my life? What about when Christian brothers and sisters fail us in the corporate world? So these are some of the questions which might, trigger insecurity in your own lives. Myself, the biggest shake-up to my security I've had happened just before I entered into senior management about 6 years ago. A person I really looked up to in my company, a leader in the organisation, left due to inappropriate behaviour. The first thought that went into my mind is, how can God let something like this happen in a Christian organisation? And this really shook me up. And this reminded me just how easy it is to fall short of God's glory. None of us can depend on our own strength. In God's graciousness, this person repented and worked hard in restoration of relationships and is serving God in other ministries right now, which is great. So our God is a God who uses sinful people to accomplish his ministries. God also raised up a great godly leader to replace him. So when you encounter fallouts of sin at your workplace, my biggest tip is not to point the finger or join with the accusers, but pray. Thank God that human sin does not thwart his plans. He can actually use sin to accomplish his plans, which is pretty amazing. Pray to God that he will help you by his Spirit to walk in his steps, especially at work. So find your security in him and try and be God's worker in the place that he has put you. And any situation can bring glory to him. And let me tell you, something that I've experienced is that our service providers, our clients, our board members, team members will notice something different about you if you stick to God's plan. And prayerfully, you can be part of their journey in knowing Jesus Christ. And I'll just finish with a verse from Colossians chapter 3, verse 23, one of my favorite verses. Whatever you do, work at it with all your heart as working for the Lord, not for human masters. That's it from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Isaac. Okay, so keep those questions coming in. I'll kick things off with a question that maybe both Isaac and Tony can reflect on. So how would Christians think about investments then if we shouldn't find our security tied to wealth?
Yeah, maybe I can go first, and Isaac, you want to pitch in as well? That'd be great. I had to think about this. Question as I was preparing the talk, I guess. I think there's nothing inherently wrong with investments and in savings and I guess super that whole that whole premise. What Jesus is saying in the story is against the attitude of finding your hope and your security ultimately in those things. And you see it in the rich man because for him, it was all about himself and he neglected God. And that was really the root problem. And that's why Jesus at the beginning, I didn't spend much time talking about this, but his warning is really about greed, about covetousness. And so, how we invest, why we invest and store our money is kind of the issue. I think that's Jesus targets.
I don't have much more to add except, some people think that if you invest in an ethical investment, you can tick the box and move on. But ethical investing actually should incorporate every facet of your life. So that means, the way you treat your workers, the way you treat other people in your team should be, ethical. Somebody told me that a sign of a real ethical CEO is somebody who actually talks to the cleaner in their office. So, they're just some extra thoughts.
Thanks, guys. Another question: how do we know that Jesus claimed to secure a right relationship with God, that this claim can be trusted?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, that's a really important question because Jesus makes a claim that through him we can have right relationship with God, and it's only through him that that's possible. How can we trust that? How can we know that to be true? I think the way that Christians answer that would be through the testimony of the Bible, of the scriptures. If the Bible is God's word to us, then it's trustworthy, and we can actually rely on the testimony about Jesus' death and resurrection, which enables us to be saved, to be right with God. Maybe another thought, if it's helpful, in terms of how can we know that that it's true, that we can rely on this. I guess the Christian faith is based on historical evidence and a historical event that Jesus did in fact die and rise again. So it's not just some sort of abstract philosophy about how you can get to God, or it's actually something that you can scrutinize, you can verify, you can assess whether it actually is reliable historically. So I think that's a really important point. Perhaps also in terms of how we know, well, we can look at the testimony, we can kind of apply logic to it, but there's also other ways to kind of know things as well in terms of our experience. Like, does what the Bible say, does the Christian message actually make sense in our experience? Does it make sense of our world? Does it make sense eternally? And also sort of in community, like the gospel has been passed down, and so there's been people that have believed all through the centuries, and so in community, it's also have made sense. That's another way we can kind of know.
Thanks. And another question is, where is God when I don't feel secure?
Yeah, I don't know if Isaac or Charlie, you want to pitch in as well. This is this is a good question. And for some people, this is a really big question. Where is God when I don't feel secure? My first thought is, and that's partly the point I was trying to make. There are times when we can feel secure when in fact we're not. And I think there are times when we can not feel secure, but when in fact the reality is we are secure because of what Jesus has done for us when it comes to our relationship with God. So, our circumstances can affect how we feel and whether we feel secure or not. But again, the great assurance of the Christian faith is it's not based on what we can do or even our circumstances, but actually based on what Jesus has already done for us. So it's grounded in something that has already happened. In Romans 5, the Apostle Paul talks about the effect of Jesus' death being that God actually demonstrates his love through Jesus and what he's done for us. So God has shown himself to love us and to give us that security, even when we might not feel it. And our feelings, our senses go up and down and at a level can't be trusted. So I think, that might, I don't know if that's helpful. But at the same time, acknowledging that that's a real pain, actually. When we don't feel secure, we don't feel God is near. At a time like this, when there's just so much going on in the world, it seems like every day there's things that would suggest that God is not active. But again, I think there's great assurance in the Christian gospel of what God has done for us, and the assurance we can find in him.
Tony, I'll just suggest there that there's a great story in the Old Testament about a man called Job, who was like the fellow in your parable, a rich man, but he actually goes through some really terrible times. He basically loses almost everything, all his riches, his family. He's left with his wife, and he's then covered in diseases. And through the whole book, we don't really see God being there very much. We see a lot of dialogue happening, but then right at the end, there's a resolution. And in fact, God speaks to Job, and he actually commends Job for having gone through that entire experience. And even though there were things that he did which weren't perfect, and for which God criticizes him and says he says Job still was a much more faithful person to me than any of his friends who were trying to comfort him and things like that. And it's at that point you realize that God had been there the whole way through. I mean, as the reader of the book, we know that from the way it's introduced. But for Job, it didn't feel like that at the time. And yet at the end, he's commended for continuing and sticking through it, even though so often he felt that God wasn't there. And he sometimes felt that he almost had to challenge God and call God out. And God says, that's the way it is. He doesn't give any explanation for why Job went through what he does, but he does commend Job, and eventually, of course, we do see a resolution and a reconciliation there.
Yeah, a really good example, David.
Yeah. Thanks, David. So another question just came through. Your security is correlated to how much you trust God and have faith in his words. Thoughts about that statement?
Yeah, I guess I would probably disagree because, again, faith, I think people think it's kind of like almost a feeling kind of thing, like how much can I feel like I'm faithful, when in fact, I think the Bible talks about it. More kind of, you either have faith or you don't, and what matters is actually the object of your faith as opposed to the strength of your faith. And so is the amount of your faith correlated to your security? I would put the focus on what your faith is in, that is God's faithfulness through Jesus, as opposed to how much faith you can muster, particularly when you're going through challenges or trials. I don't know if there are other thoughts to that, but
that sounds pretty good. We have no more questions. So we, if anyone else has any, send it through now, or just pipe up, unmute yourself.
If we get in contact post the event as well, very happy to talk further.
Cool. Thanks, Tony. Hopefully Tony's talk and his Q&A has given everyone plenty of food for thought today. On behalf of all of us at the Fellowship Beyond Numbers Committee, thank you, Tony, for speaking to us today.
Pleasure.
So if you have enjoyed the talk today and you want to come to the meeting where you explore these big questions more regularly, can I invite you to consider signing up for one of our Hope groups? So these are more intimate, smaller groups where people gather. It's online, so it's you don't have to go out of your way, and you can share stories of how you're going, share reflecting on the stories from the Bible and the life of Jesus, and just generally get to know people during these times where there's so much uncertainty and chaos. And we'd love to have you along to one of our many Hope groups. If you are, I think Martin shared a link around just now. Please have a look. And if you want to know the exact time and dates, there's a Wednesday 12:30 group, and then there's a Thursday 12 o'clock group. And we might even add more groups if we have lots of interest and it suits and there's more convenient times for people. So please check out the link below. And on behalf of the organizing committee here at City Bible Forum and Fellowship Beyond Numbers, thank you for joining today. Stick around if you want to chat. Otherwise, I look forward to seeing you in one of the Hope groups or our next event in June. Thank you all. Bye-bye. Have a good Friday.